Hey there, I'm Teddy, and today I'm in the great Spanish city of Toledo, the second most beautiful Toledo in the world, right after, you guessed it, sunny Toledo, Ohio. Now, Toledo is probably most famous for being the old capital of Spain, and this city has the feel of a capital. There's a big river that runs through it. It has a long, rich history that spans back to the Roman Empire. This makes sense. What doesn't make sense, however, is why in 1561, King Philip II decided to move the capital north 43 miles to Madrid, which is a pretty objectively bad place for a capital. Now, I'm not saying this because I have something out against Madrid. It's one of my favorite cities in the world, but I'm just saying, like, strictly historically speaking, the decision to move the capital from Toledo to Madrid really made zero sense. Look, when you're trying to place a capital somewhere, there's kind of a checklist of things that make a good capital. These include cultural significance, geographic advantage, political strategy, etc. You don't have to have all of these things, but you should probably have at least some of them. But looking at these criteria, the decision to make Madrid the capital is even more baffling. Let's start with the culture. Now, culturally, Toledo had a lot going for it. It was an important city during the Roman Empire, the capital during the Visigothic Empire, and a key city during Moorish rule. Let's fast forward to the 1500s, aka the century when they switched the capital to Madrid. Now, Toledo wasn't officially the capital because there weren't official capitals at this time. It was basically wherever the royal court was. But Toledo was the preferred city of Charles V, the Holy Roman Emperor, which earned Toledo the nickname the Imperial City. On the other hand, Madrid during the 1500s was astonishingly unimportant. There weren't any big pilgrimages or famous Madrilenians or big sites. Its origin story kind of sucked too. I mean, it was made as a military outpost for the bigger and much more important Toledo during Moorish rule. There were dozens of small cities just as important, or I guess unimportant, as Madrid at the time. It was the dollar store great value version of Toledo, the Dr. Perky to Toledo's Dr. Pepper. Some people say, oh, the decision makes sense because Madrid is right in the middle of Spain, which would kind of make sense if it wasn't for the fact that Toledo is basically just as central as Madrid. It's just 43 miles away. Nowadays, it's maybe half hour, an hour by train. Then you might think, okay, maybe Madrid has a better geographic advantage, but it doesn't have any natural wealth or major mineral deposits or anything like that. Also, keep in mind that pretty much every successful city around the world is located by some body of water, be it a lake or an ocean or a river. This is the bread and butter of a good city because it allows you to transport goods and communicate with other cities. Toledo has one, the Tagus River, which proved vital for transporting resources. Tirso de Molina, the same guy who invented the character of Don Juan, wrote about this Tagus River, referring to its water as, quote, nectar that satisfies thirst and makes faces beautiful. Even Toledo, Ohio has a body of water, the gorgeous, breathtaking Maumee River. Madrid, on the other hand, is in the middle of the desert. It does have a river, but it looks like this. It's called the Manzanares River, and it's a river that's so weak that people have been clowning on it for nearly half a millennium. The same Tirso de Molina that praised the Tagus River wrote about the Manzanares too, saying, quote, Manzanares, that river whose currents are so without flesh that it looks like a skeleton of glass. He also wrote about this bridge that crosses the Manzanares called the Bridge of Segovia, saying that it brings a tear to people's eyes because of just how stupid it looks that this giant bridge is next to this pathetic river. And over 100 years later, writer Pio Baroja would describe the Manzanares as, quote, ugly, tragic, sinister, smelly river, black river that carries debris from sewers, fetuses, and dead cats. So no cool history, no big infrastructure, no major river. Madrid didn't have any of these things that Toledo had. So this begs the question, why did they move the capital there? The weird thing is that Felipe II was a prolific writer, but no one can find any record of why he chose Madrid as the capital. Some speculate that Philip II chose it out of sentimental reasons. His mother passed away in Madrid, so maybe it was to mourn her loss or pay respects to her. His wife supposedly hated the weather in Toledo and the big walls of their palace, so maybe he moved the court to please her. Because if anything is more powerful than the basic rules of geopolitics, it's true love. But outside these more kind of flimsy legends, there is one explanation that makes sense in a kind of counterintuitive way. That Philip II chose Madrid precisely because there was nothing in it. Given that Toledo was essentially the ecclesiastical center of Spain, he found himself getting into lots of spats with the archbishop, who would challenge his royal power and put the people against him. So it made sense to move the court to a city that he could shape how he wanted. Phil was also a fan of Renaissance architecture and art from all his worldly travels. While Toledo was already very tightly built in traditional Spanish and Arab architecture, Madrid could serve as kind of a blank slate. I should probably also mention that Toledo wasn't in like tip-top shape. Even though it had this big river going right by it, it didn't necessarily have lots of clean drinking water. And if you combine that with really narrow streets that don't let in a lot of sunlight, you kind of get an unhygienic mess. Madrid, on the other hand, has always had some pretty solid groundwater. Trust me, if you talk to someone from Madrid for more than like 5 minutes, they're sure to bring it up. They're still very proud of it. But even if Philip II had some pretty good reasons for moving the capital to Madrid, the city was just simply not ready for a big influx of people. Over the 40 years after becoming capital, the population tripled in Madrid, and it was a pretty tight city because it was still pretty small, meaning that it was bound to face some pretty bad overcrowding. But despite this rocky start, Madrid has stayed the capital of Spain ever since, only growing in power and significance. The same, however, cannot be said about Toledo. The people of Toledo didn't believe that this was the beginning of the end. They were convinced that their king would come back to them eventually, realizing the error of his ways. They even wrote to him, asking him, quote, to come with his court for a few years to the said city so that he could return to what he used to do and recover his damages. But of course, he never did. And over the centuries, Toledo shrunk from an imperial city to a day trip destination, overshadowed by the now massive Madrid. Toledo will likely never become the capital of Spain, no matter how many Change.org petitions I start. But that doesn't mean that it doesn't have a special place in Spanish history. And even after its decline, Toledo continued to forge its own legacy. How, you may ask? Well, in 1931, Toledo, Spain made history by joining into the first sister city relationship in the world with none other than Toledo, Ohio. If you enjoyed this video, I think you'd also enjoy my other video about Spanish history. It talks a bit about, there's a fly, about the Franco and the history of the Civil War and everything else. So I think you should check it out. It's on the screen. See you later.